One person, one choice, one single moment can be the catalyst for a total transformation. Witness the stories that change the world, one small spark at a time, through our cinematic lens. Hit subscribe now and be part of the change you want to see.
I didn't flinch. I didn't make a sound. I just stood there in my kitchen holding my phone, staring at a photograph that had no business existing. The refrigerator was humming. The coffee I'd made 20 minutes ago was going cold on the counter, and the world I thought I knew had just quietly folded in half. It was a Thursday evening. My daughter's wedding was in 2 days. I need you to understand something before I go any further. I am 63 years old. I have buried a mother, a father, and a husband I loved for 31 years before the cancer took him. I know what it means to keep yourself standing when everything inside you wants to collapse. I am not a woman who screams. I am not a woman who throws things. I learned a long time ago that falling apart is a luxury, and I have never been able to afford it. So I set the phone down on the counter next to the cold coffee. I pulled out the chair at the kitchen table, the one by the window where the evening light comes in golden. And I sat down, and I breathed. The photograph had come to me by accident. That's the part that still catches me sometimes, even now. Not a tip, not someone trying to cause trouble. An accident. My daughter's maid of honor, a sweet girl named Petra, who had known my daughter since middle school, had been trying to send me a photo of the rehearsal dinner centerpieces for my approval. She sent it to the wrong thread, and in the same thread, just above the photo she meant to send, was a screenshot she had apparently sent herself for safekeeping. A screenshot of a text conversation between my future son-in-law and a woman I recognized immediately. The woman was my best friend of 22 years. Her name is Nora. Was Nora. I don't know what tense to use anymore. We had met at a church women's group the year after my husband passed, and she had held my hand through the worst grief of my life. She had sat in my kitchen drinking decaf at midnight more times than I could count. She had been invited to my daughter's wedding as a guest of honor. She was supposed to sit in the third row, on the bride's side. The texts in that screenshot were not the texts of two people who were merely friends. I don't want to describe them in detail. I will only say that they were specific enough that there was no other interpretation, no innocent explanation, no way to talk myself into believing I had misread something. I read them. I set the phone face down on the table. I picked it back up and read them once more. Then I put it down again. My daughter's name is Ren. She is 31 years old and she has her father's eyes, that particular shade of brown that looks almost amber in the right light. She has been planning this wedding for 14 months. The venue alone took 6 months to secure. The dress had been altered 3 times. She called me after every decision, every tasting, every fitting, not because she needed my approval, but because that's who she is. She includes people she loves. She always has. She did not know what I had just seen. And her fiancé, the man she was supposed to marry on Saturday, was standing in my living room right now, 2 doors away, watching a basketball game with her while she sorted through the last of the wedding envelopes. His name is Grant. Grant Holloway. He is 34, works in commercial real estate, has a wide, easy smile and a firm handshake, and I had never once in 3 years had a reason to distrust him. He brought me flowers on my birthday. He helped me fix the leak under my kitchen sink without being asked. He looked at my daughter like she was the only person in any room they entered together. And for the past, I would find out later, 7 months, he had been exchanging those texts with my best friend. I did not go into the living room. I did not walk out the front door and keep walking. I sat at that kitchen table until I could feel my own heartbeat return to something close to normal. Then I poured the cold coffee down the sink, rinsed the mug, and put it in the drying rack. And I started to think. Here is the thing about being a mother that no one tells you when you're young. You do not always get to do what feels right. Sometimes you only get to choose between what will hurt your child now and what might protect them longer. And that is not a choice that comes with a clean answer. I turned it over in my mind for the rest of that evening. I sat in the dark of my bedroom after everyone had said goodnight, and I turned it over and over and over. If I told Ren that night, she would want to confront him immediately. There would be yelling, tears, denials. He would say the screenshot was taken out of context. Nora would say the same. My daughter would be standing in the rubble of her engagement 24 hours before she was supposed to get married, with 140 guests flying in from 4 states. A non-refundable venue, a dress hanging on the back of her closet door. She might believe him. People believe what they want to believe when the alternative is too devastating. I might lose her trust and his guilt might walk clean out the door. Or I could wait. I could gather what I needed. I could make sure that when the truth came out, it was undeniable. Not because I wanted to humiliate anyone, but because my daughter deserved certainty. She deserved to look at the evidence with her own eyes and know that she was not crazy, that she was not overreacting, that what had been done to her was real and documented and witnessed. I made my decision before I fell asleep that night. The next morning, Friday, one day before the wedding, I called in a favor from a woman I know named Vera, who works in IT and has done freelance work before. I didn't tell her everything. I told her enough. I asked her if she could help me pull together a thorough, clean record of a text thread from a screenshot, timestamp verified, in a format that could be displayed on a screen at an event. She asked me what kind of event. I told her it was a wedding. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "How soon do you need it?" I said, "Tonight." She said she would see what she could do. While I waited, I did what I have always done when I need to keep myself from unraveling. I cleaned. I wiped down the kitchen counters. I reorganized the linen closet. I sat with my hands folded in my lap for exactly 4 minutes, and then I stood up and wiped down the counters again. My daughter called twice to talk about the morning timeline. I answered both times. I sounded normal. I have had a lot of practice sounding normal. At 2 in the afternoon, I drove to the venue under the pretense of dropping off some personal items for the bridal suite. I asked the event's coordinator, a calm and efficient young man who had clearly weathered more than one family crisis in this building, whether the welcome slideshow equipment would be set up the following morning before guests arrived. He confirmed that it would. I asked whether it was possible to update the slideshow content the morning of the event if I had additional photos I wanted to include. He said yes, that was standard. Just bring a USB drive and check in at the AV booth before 9. I thanked him and drove home. That evening, Vera sent me what I had asked for. 41 screenshots, time-stamped, cross-referenced against dates I recognized. Dates that included Wren's birthday dinner, the night she and Grant had announced their engagement to the family, the week she had been in the hospital for a minor procedure, and Nora had offered to help Grant with errands. 41 screenshots, arranged chronologically, formatted cleanly, ready to be loaded into a presentation. I sat with it for a long time. I want to be honest with you here, because I think that matters. Looking at that evidence did not make me feel powerful. It did not make me feel righteous. It made me feel very, very tired. I thought about Nora's face the first time I met her. I thought about how she had held me at my husband's funeral. I thought about all the years I had trusted her with the softest parts of myself. And I thought about my daughter, asleep down the hall, dreaming about tomorrow. I transferred the files to a USB drive. I put the drive in my coat pocket. I set my alarm for 6 in the morning. The wedding was at 11. I will tell you this, the morning itself was almost beautiful. The venue was a restored Victorian estate about 40 minutes outside the city, with white roses climbing the front gate and light that came through the tall windows in long, pale columns. Wren was radiant in a way that only happens when someone is purely, uncomplicated happy. And for a few minutes standing in the doorway of the bridal suite watching her laugh with her bridesmaids, I almost let myself pretend. Almost. I checked in at the AV booth at 8:47. I handed over the USB drive. I told the technician that I had some additional photos for the welcome slideshow and asked him to add them at the end of the existing sequence. He didn't ask questions. He plugged in the drive, pulled up the files, and nodded. "Do you want these to loop or play through once?" he asked. "Ice once," I said. "Just the once will be enough." I walked back to the bridal suite and helped my daughter with her veil. Guests began arriving at 10:15. The welcome slideshow ran on a large screen in the foyer as people found their seats. Photos of Wren and Grant through the years, their engagement pictures, family portraits. And then, at the end of the sequence, before the screen went dark, 41 slides. Timestamps. Names. Dates that anyone who had been following along in the wedding program would immediately recognize. I was standing at the back of the foyer when the room changed. It didn't happen all at once. It happened the way that understanding usually happens. In a wave. Starting at the front where people were standing closest to the screen, moving backward through the crowd. I watched faces shift. I watched people lean in, then straighten. I watched someone tap their neighbor's arm. Grant was in the groom's room. Nora was in the third row, on the bride's side, holding a program. She saw it before he did. I know this because I was watching her specifically. I watched the color leave her face. I watched her hands tighten around the program. She did not move for a long moment, and then she stood up, and she walked toward the exit, and the murmur in the foyer grew louder, and someone went to find the wedding coordinator. And I walked calmly to the bridal suite and knocked on the door and told my daughter that she needed to come speak with me before the ceremony began. She took one look at my face and knew. I am not going to describe those 20 minutes in the bridal suite in detail. Some things belong only to the people who lived them. What I will tell you is that I showed her the original screenshot on my phone, and then I told her what was on the slideshow, and I told her I was sorry. I was so sorry that I had not found a better way to handle it. And I told her that I had not told her the night before because I had been afraid she wouldn't believe me without proof she could see for herself, and I had needed her to be certain. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "How long?" I told her 7 months, from the timestamps. She put her hands flat on the makeup table in front of her and looked at herself in the mirror for a moment. Then she stood up. What happened next was Ren's choice, not mine. I want to be clear about that. I had done what I believed I needed to do. The rest belonged to her. She walked out of the bridal suite, and she found Grant in the corridor, where someone had already pulled him aside. And she looked at him with that steady amber-eyed gaze that she inherited from her father. And she said very quietly, without drama, without volume, "I need you to tell me the truth right now, or I will never speak to you again." He told her the truth. It took about 4 minutes. His voice broke twice. He said he didn't know how it had happened. He said he was sorry. He said a lot of things that people say when they've been caught and they're scrambling. And I stood at the end of the corridor and I watched my daughter listen. And I watched her face stay completely still. And I thought about how much of her father was in her. The ceremony did not take place. The wedding coordinator, that same calm young man, handled the guests with remarkable efficiency. There was an announcement. People were gently directed back out through the foyer. There were some raised voices in the parking lot, and a great deal of phone activity, and probably 14 different versions of the story circulating before anyone had driven off the property. Nora had already left. She called me 3 days later. I answered because I had decided even before she called that I would answer. She talked for a long time. She cried. She said she didn't know what had happened to her, that she had told herself it meant nothing, that she had been lonely in ways she hadn't known how to name, that she had made the worst decision of her life and she knew it. She said she had been carrying a weight she hadn't been able to put down. I listened to all of it. When she finished, I said, "I believe you that you're sorry. I believe that you're telling me the truth right now. And I need you to understand that those things are true, and I still cannot have you in my life. Not because I don't forgive you. I'm working on forgiving you, because carrying that is too heavy for me, and I'm 63 years old, and I am done carrying heavy things that aren't mine. But forgiveness is for me. It is not the same as trust. And trust, Nora, what we had, I don't know how to rebuild that. I don't know if it's possible, and I'm not willing to find out right now." She said she understood. I don't know if she did, but I meant every word. Ren took a week and went to stay with her cousin up in Vermont. She called me every day. Sometimes we talked for an hour. Sometimes she just needed to hear my voice for a few minutes, and then she had to go. That was fine. I was here. I am always here. About 6 weeks after the wedding that wasn't, she came home for a weekend. We made the chicken and dumplings her father used to love, the recipe I have been making since before she was born. And we sat at the kitchen table in the evening light, and we ate, and we talked, and we didn't talk, in the comfortable way that you only ever have with someone who has known you your whole life. At one point, she looked at me across the table and said, "How did you know I'd want to see it for myself? How did you know telling me the night before wouldn't be enough?" I thought about it for a moment. "Because you're like me," I said. "You need to see the thing to believe it. You need to stand in front of it. And I needed you to stand in front of something he couldn't explain away." She nodded slowly. Then she said, "I'm glad you came to the wedding." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. "There was never a question," I told her. "I was always going to come. She's doing better now. Not fine. Fine takes time, and there's no shortcut through it. But better." She laughs at things again. She made a list of places she wants to travel, which she showed me last Sunday with the kind of tentative excitement that I recognized as the beginning of someone reclaiming their life. She has been seeing a therapist, which I am grateful for in ways I cannot fully put into words. And me? I am sleeping through the night again, most. I cleaned out the part of my phone where Nora's number used to be. I rearranged the kitchen, just because I wanted it different. I have been walking in the mornings, the long way around the neighborhood, the route that takes about 40 minutes and ends with the hill that always makes my knees complain. Some mornings, coming back over that hill, I think about what it means to love someone enough to walk into the fire instead of away from it. My daughter thought I was brave, coming to that wedding. People said that afterward. Brave, strong. But I wasn't brave. Brave implies you're not afraid. I was terrified every minute of that morning. I was terrified in the foyer watching that slideshow. I was terrified knocking on the bridal suite door. I just loved her more than I was afraid. That's the only thing I can tell you. At the end of it all, when you strip away everything else, that is the only true thing. I loved her more than I was afraid, so I came.